Welcome to the Madness and Grace podcast, where we explore the connection between mental health and faith. I'm Dr. Matthew Stanford, neuroscientist, author, and mental health advocate.
And I'm Dr. Madeline Stiers, therapist and trauma researcher. We're so glad you're joining us today. Each week, we have authentic conversations about personal stories, we share professional insights, and explore the meaningful ways faith can influence mental well-being.
Whether you're seeking comfort, understanding, or simply a new perspective, we're here to journey with you. Thanks for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's conversation.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Madness and Grace. Today, I have a special guest, Dr. Peggy Determeyer. She actually works at the Hope and Healing Center Institute with me, and Matt, who will be joining us again at a later episode. But she's the director of our HHCI CARES program and a McGee Fellow in Bioethics and Aging. And she and I have been working together here for 9 years. And she runs a bunch of our support services for a bunch of different areas for aging and death and grief support and caregiving support, things like that. So today, Peggy and I are going to be talking about grief and what that looks like, especially as we approach the holiday season, and we know that grief can be a really hard concept to work through at any point in time, but whether your grief is new or old, the holiday seasons tend to be pretty challenging for a lot of people. So we're going to run through about talking what grief can do, what are the different types of grief, how do you support yourself after a loss, how can you support another one after a loss, and then what are some things to do, next steps, and what you should and should not say to someone who's grieving. So thanks for joining me today, Peggy. Glad to have you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So I guess we'll just start off with what you work with a lot of people in the clinic that are dealing with grief. So if someone were just to ask you, what is grief? What is that? What would you
Goodness,
say?
it can look different for everyone. There's obviously the immediacy of a bereavement situation when somebody you love has died and the changes that can occur because of that. Some of it is physical. It's the things you're feeling, the tension that you feel in your body. It can be emotional, the sadness. It can be practical, what I call the business of grief, of trying to go through all of the things that you have to do when somebody dies. They're legal things that have to be accomplished. And that can be very stressful. And so for a lot of people, the immediacy of having to deal with the business of death overshadows the feelings that they may have. And feelings can come from a death, but it also can come from other kinds of losses. And we sometimes play down those losses. For example, people who are thrust into a caregiving situation, they may have had plans and a presumed future, and they're now grieving the loss of that presumed future, particularly as a caregiver is taking care of someone. It can be a spouse or a parent, and all of the plans that they have made together get blown up. And so life changes. It can be the loss of a pet, because for some people, if you believe AARP, they say that 10% of people over 50 are living alone and have no next of kin. And so for folks like that, the loss of a pet can be as devastating as the loss of another person. So we have what I call the griefs that our culture acknowledges and respects, for lack of a better term. And then we have the griefs that are less clear, and they've been termed as ambiguous griefs, where the culture doesn't exactly acknowledge that these are true losses that people should be grieving.
So the ambiguous loss or grief, is that the pet or the caregiver, or what would that look like?
Any or all of the above. It's kind of different for each person. And for some people, they've had multiple losses run all together. in my work facilitating our grief support group, there have been lots of people, for example, living through the pandemic who either lost multiple loved ones due to the pandemic, or their circumstances changed, or if they were caregivers and weren't able to socialize in the same way, their care partner, declined by an order of magnitude worse than they were before the pandemic happened. So there are lots of drivers in there that we have to think about when we're talking to someone about the nature of their losses and how they're looking at them. And it's different for every person. Every person, some people may have been taught that you've got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and buckle up. And sadly, that's not always the best way to handle a grief that you're having. If you've lost your job of, many years or a few years, that can really affect your self-esteem and be the driver for another form of grief.
Yeah, it's interesting. Typically when you say grief, we think the death of a loved one, right? Or friend, or like the death of a person. But just like you said, there's so many different types of grief that come up, especially working in the worlds that we do. You as a chaplain, me as a therapist, like we sit and talk with people. And what I see a lot of in the clinic working with clients is relational grief, right?
Yeah.
Which I think aligns somewhat with this ambiguous caregiving kind of grief that you were talking about, but the loss of a friendship. The person didn't die. The friendship ended. And usually friendships end typically because it's on bad terms. Not this long kind of fade out that happens as you age and kind of grow apart, or the loss of a romantic partner, or even family. So we see a lot of our clients struggle with their relationships with their families. And so the holidays become especially challenging because their family's alive, maybe even in the same city, and there's no communication. So they're overwhelmed with this grief that kind of re-hits every year in a different way of like, my family's here. I can't do anything about it. I've lost all of this. And that's very different. I think the way as a clinician I would work through that with someone is very different than the loss, like the death of a person. But it is the kind of, we do say this is a grief. Like you've lost this, your mother or father is still alive and you're not talking with them. You guys have cut ties. That's really challenging. I mean, do you see those as similar or like wildly different?
They're similar and they're different. In part, it's because every person is different. We think about, and I'm sure you find with folks in the clinic, the term of art we use here is resilience. Some people are able to bounce back from different kinds of losses, and some people aren't. And then there are the occasions, and the holidays are particularly challenging for some folks because they've always done a certain thing. They've always gotten together with their extended family. Well, if members of the family have died, or the people who put the dinners together have died, or you've become estranged from those folks, whatever reason, all of those things can lead to a sense of loss and grieving, and it's going to be different for every circumstance because everybody has a different way of coping with loss.
So is there, I think I know the answer and I know you know the answer, but is there a right way and a wrong way to cope with your grief?
And that's the thing that I think we have to disabuse ourselves of and give permission to grieve the way they need to grieve. I've had folks to tell me, oh, I know I shouldn't be crying all the time, or I know I shouldn't let these things cause me to cry. And I say, why forever not? Your feelings are your feelings, and you have to give yourself permission to have those feelings. And if the people around you don't give you that permission, then you might need to step away to say, I'm really sorry, but right now I have to take care of myself. And that's why self-care is so very important as part of the grieving process, so that people do the things that give themselves permission to feel what they're feeling, to let those feelings go through, and then to do whatever the actions are, whether it's meditating or praying or going for a walk or reading a book, or preferably not anything, with using substances, because those are bad for you. But it's really important to give yourself permission to do the things that you need to do to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, I think that's why there's been the typical grief journey, right? What we think of, you probably learn in school that now there's so many different ways to think about grief, but like anger, sadness, bargaining, denial, and then resolve. I think I might have those mixed up, but I think the whole point of creating this kind of structure for grief is because it is so all over the place from like these emotions, and they're so intense. And like, here's an example that I try to give about when we talk about dialectic therapy, which is one of the therapies we offer here, a way of thinking dialectically when two things seem to be in contrast but aren't, is grief or death, right? Like, you've got a person who's sick and suffering physically, emotionally, psychologically unwell, and they die. There's a sadness because the grief says, I love them, I miss them, I'm sad. And there's a sense of relief oftentimes, right? Like, they are no longer in physical, emotional, psychological pain. There's a little bit of relief for if I'm the caregiver, right? Like, this is now not something that I'm doing 24/7 or whatever that would have looked like. And those seem like conflicting emotions, like relief and sadness that someone has died. But they do live in the same space. So as people are going through a grief journey, like, I just remind them, there's no wrong way to grieve. Now, if it gets to a point and you don't feel like you're making any movement in that, like, talk with someone, connect, get into a group, talk with a therapist, all of that. But if you need to pause, people, like we say, feel your emotions. And yes, feel your emotions. And if you need to pause because you got to go to work and, you just have to get through the day that's fine too. But also don't totally shut all of your emotions out every day, all day. Be aware of what's going on that you may want to be expressing and talking about, and find safe people to talk about. Because I think there's a happy middle ground, right? You see people who are they feel like they shouldn't be crying as much. They're like overly emotional. I'm putting air quotes around that. And then people who intellectualize, well, I know they were going to die. It's fine that they're dead. Like, I knew it was coming. This is sad, yes, but intellectually I knew it. And so they kind of are not really feeling the emotion. They're avoiding it with the intellectualization of it. And there's a happy middle ground, right? Yeah, it's an interesting place to be. Coming into the holidays, what do you suggest for people
Coming
who might be
into the
grieving?
holidays, it's really important for people to stop and think about what's important to them. As I said a few minutes ago, we sometimes dwell too much on the way we have always done things. And so it is okay to give ourselves permission to do things differently. So if we have always had a huge dinner with every member of the family, and lo and behold, grandma has severe or has progressive dementia that is not getting better, and her caregiver is her husband, and he's all worked up about having to make sure that his wife is going to be okay, and the adult children are concerned about what the grandchildren are going to experience. And there are all kinds of complications of people worrying about everybody else. It might be better to step back and have some smaller gatherings. People with advanced illnesses, whether they're mental or physical, a lot of times can't do well with big crowds, and it may be better to break it down into either smaller gatherings. I've been with lots of caregivers who look at me and say, "You mean I can do that?" Yeah, you need to do what's best for the situation, and giving yourself permission to say, "Okay, I'm going to get together with just ourselves or a few other people is okay." So it's important to look at what are all of the circumstances and what is the best for the families who are ailing and what is best for the caregivers in the situation. And if it's some other circumstance like mom who always did all the planning for the meal is now dead, and there really isn't anybody else who's interested in stepping up and managing a large gathering, then break down the gathering and either go someplace else where somebody else is doing the work, if it's possible, to go to a restaurant where you can have some private space and everybody can be together, but nobody has to be responsible for doing all of the work. And for some people, that's a possibility. For others, just not having the big gathering may be better. Some people end up, I have a colleague who last year, after his wife died earlier in the year for Thanksgiving, just went on a short cruise by himself to give himself space to do something different. And he didn't have to be around a lot of people that were going to be worrying over him. So again, it's different for everybody, and it's different for the circumstances that present themselves, but it's okay to make different plans, and we have to give ourselves permission to do that.
Yeah. And I think, so if you're the person who's experienced the loss, right, like giving yourself that permission, understanding where your limits are, setting boundaries, kind of verbalizing that with friends and family, that if you're moving away from some of the traditions, that this is why, and we're going to shift this year our focus. And as the family and friends of these people that have lost a loved one, I think the idea is to be as understanding as possible, even if it, quote, ruins your Christmas or Thanksgiving or Hanukkah. What you need to recognize that they're not making changes to upset you or have a negative impact on your holiday. They're making these changes to preserve their ability to move through this loss, and maybe they wouldn't be a great guest in this space. So maybe maybe it's best for you that they don't come, or they don't want to be around people. They want to shift and it just be their immediate family. I mean, and that's hard when it's impacting other people, but definitely for the holidays, we want to be understanding and aware, and then offer support if they, well, we're not going to be able to make it this year. If someone says they're not able to come, that's okay. We want you here, and we understand that you're not going to be able to make it. If you want to just swing by and grab some food to go, like, happy to do that,
Or offer to bring them something. Can I bring you a container of what are your favorite things from the holiday dinner? And I'll make sure I bring you some either the day before or the day after.
Yeah. And sometimes it's asking, and then sometimes it's just doing, right? Whether it's holidays or not, but after someone has died, especially if you're close to the family, you may know things that need to be done that they typically would do. So whether it's holiday stuff or kind of typical day-to-day things, just jump in and do it, right? Especially if you're kind of around day to day, there's an example given to me the other day that someone had passed away, and this person wasn't a part of the immediate family, but was around, and said, the family had come in to gather, and the spouse of the person who had died was trying to get the food together, and they said, why don't you go hang out with your family? I'll come in and set up the food so you can go sit and rest and just be, because they were like, I can do these tasks. That's easy. It's an easy way to offer support. Go over and just take the dog out, take him for a walk. So the people in the immediate aftermath of a loss doesn't have to think about those things. So that's like following the immediacy of the death. But then come the holidays, we tend to think like, oh, yay, joy, happy, happy. When this person, especially when it's the first year after a loss, this family's going, the holidays are such a joyous time typically for a lot of people. And then when you've had someone die, you go, oh my gosh, they were such a integral part of this family dynamic. And yeah, I mean, it can be really challenging. And if you're not really in there with that family, we tend to go, well, you're not over it yet? Well, you're still sad about, right? Like, it's been 3 months. You're still upset that your, wife of 35 years has died? No, I'm not over it. It's been 3 months, and I don't, we could talk about this all day. I don't think grief is something you get over. It's something that becomes a part of who you are and you grow around.
It does. And at some point, the things that make you sad may also give you some joy. I was reading an article in the New York Times this morning that somebody had written about his daughter who had died at the age of 38 of an undiagnosed heart condition. And he talked about the things that had made him sad over the last umpteen years were now bringing him joy. And that's a perfect example of what you just mentioned with him integrating his grief into his life, of acknowledging and being able to be grateful for the life that he shared with his daughter for as long as they were together. And I think those things are just wonderful examples of the love that they shared and the love that they continue to have even in death.
Yeah. It's, I had someone ask me why grief is so painful. Why is this a part of the human experience? And I think, I don't know the answer necessarily, but if you don't have grief without this immense amount of love for someone, so it's not to say your grief is bigger, you loved them more, they loved you more, but it's kind of an acknowledgement of this relationship and love that you've had. And actually, really, I think what they asked me was, why can't I stop crying? But I said it's related to your grief, right? And it's a show of love.
It is, because if we haven't loved someone, their death doesn't, it may say, oh, I'm really sad that so-and-so died, but it doesn't have the same impact on your life as someone you've been emotionally involved with.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
it's,
there's another line I've heard that grief is love looking for a place to go.
Oh, that's sad. Oh, but that's a good, I mean, that makes sense though. And it's, you have to find the place for it to, and grief doesn't go away, right?
No.
Like, it's not something that, especially with an untimely loss. So a loss out of kind of traditional order. So the loss of a child at any age, but especially a young child. Grief doesn't, it's not, you can look up grief timelines online and it'll say, you'll experience all these stages and then you hit resolve and well, then you might go backwards. So it's not linear. It's all over the place and it never goes away. You learn to live with the grief and it becomes a part of you and you grow around it. But so it feels less and less painful not because it's shrunk, but you've grown around it, in some sense.
Well, the pain takes a different form.
Right.
Because you turn it into something. The things you've read about people whose children died of cancer and they become involved with cancer education, or the people whose loved ones have died. The organization that looks for lost children, that grew out of someone's grief over their own child being kidnapped, and those are healthy ways of making a difference and living out your grief without letting it devastate you.
Yeah. So at what point do you suggest someone look for a chaplain or a therapist to talk to if their grief becomes, at what point would you say it might be time for you to talk to a professional?
I would say anytime there is unresolved and your own emotions are such that you're saying, I don't want to live this way. And some of it has to do, everybody is different. After my mom died, my dad went to one grief support group and he came back and he said, I'm not doing that again. Because sitting around listening to other people's sadness did not help him. Over time, he was able to use his feelings and turn it into a way of positive good for himself. And how to do that and when to do that really does vary from person to person. The sadness to me is when someone, I met a woman years ago in the hospital, and she was talking about her son's death as if it were yesterday. And I said, when did he die? And she said, 26 years ago. And to me, that's sad because she had not embraced his life into her life and acknowledged the good and the bad that came out of it. All she did was continue to grieve. And that's what's called complicated grief. And yes, a long time ago, she should have reached out to somebody. I'll give a shameless plug. The Hope and Healing Center offers 2 grief support groups. We also do one-on-one coaching for folks who aren't prepared to talk in a group setting, but in Houston, there are lots of different grief support groups. And outside of Houston, there are different grief support groups. Faith communities a lot of times offer them for their own membership. There are some specific programs, and whether that's the kind of support you want or need is completely up to you. But if nothing else, at least try it. And you may find that being simpatico with other folks who are experiencing losses, you can help each other and try to find the things that give you a sense of accomplishment or give you a sense of joy, even in a time of sadness.
Absolutely. We'll put a little information in the show notes about the 2 grief groups that Peggy and her team run. For anybody who's interested, they are via Zoom. So I think there may be a registration, but we'll put some information in there to get you that out there. But if you don't have the support or don't feel like you have the support to talk to people in your life about your loss, reach out to people if that's something you need. You say, I need to be talking about it. I need to have this relational aspect of my grief where I'm sharing it. And that's absolutely normal. But it's also normal to not want to share it with a stranger and not want to go into a room of people that you don't know and be like, this is why I'm sad that this person has died.
But sometimes it's a safe place to do it, because if you do it sometimes do it with your friends and coworkers is not the best thing for them or for you, because some people don't want to talk about it. They I don't want to say they're in denial, but they're too wrapped up of there, but for the grace of God go I, and they don't want to talk about their losses. One of the things my dad commented on after my mom died was that people didn't want to say her name. Almost like they were afraid that if they said her name, they would make him sad. And what made him sad was he wanted to talk about her.
Yeah. Yeah, people are very uncomfortable around grief. If it's not your grief, you're not involved in this kind of like, I knew this person super well. So many people get uncomfortable. Like they won't say death or dead. They won't use those words. They'll say like passed on. And that's totally fine. But you can also say someone died because that's what happened.
I lost them.
Yeah.
Where'd you lose them?
Yeah. They went out into the field and got lost. No, people get uncomfortable. So if you're listening to this to try and figure out how to help someone and you're going, I don't know sometimes you don't even have to say anything, right? Like you can just be present. And then if it feels too heavy, say, hey, have you talked to other people about this? See if there's other support that they can lean on. But I think, yeah, there's right and wrong things that you can say. Peggy, you got a list of those, right?
Yeah. One of my heroes since I've been doing this line of work is Dr. Kate Bowler, who's a seminary professor at Duke University. And she's written several books, but she also has a weekly podcast. But in her first book, the title of which I absolutely love, it's Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. And she has an appendix in this book there's one appendix has things you should not say, as in preferencing my aunt had cancer or at least ... Those kinds of phrases, at least they're in a better place.
Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah. And, but she replaces it with things like, when can I bring you lunch? Or it sounds like you're having a really hard time. I'm here for you. And the last one on the list is my favorite, which is just silence. And I call that being a sojourner in grief, because that's the person who accompanies you. And presence is so powerful. And words need not be used. And I think if there's anything our listeners can take from today is if you have someone important in your life whose loved one has died or whose job has changed, simply acknowledging that you're there for them and you will help be with them. You will accompany them on this journey. It can be a good thing for everybody. And if someone doesn't want 20 people around them for Thanksgiving dinner, say, that's okay. I'll bring you a box and I'm here for you.
I love that. A sojourner in grief. That's because I think those are some helpful things because so many people are so uncomfortable in grief. And, I've even, as a professional, I've been uncomfortable before, whether it's with a client or, my friends and family. And sometimes I'm just very transparent though. So sometimes I'll just say, I love you, and I don't have good words for you right now, but I'm here, and I'm here to support you in it. And
I have told people more than once, if I had a magic bullet to give you or a pill, I would do it. And there's no such thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's just something you have to do, and I will be here for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay, before we go, I have another question for you. It's
Okay.
about grief. One of the things that we deal with here at the Hope and Healing Center a lot is religion and spirituality and clinical
Mhm.
work, right? I mean, that's part of it. Um, as a chaplain or just any, as a researcher, what do you say, I guess, what do you say to someone who is upset with God or their higher power after the death of a loved one?
I say, don't you think God is big enough? And I have said this more than once. Don't you think God's big enough to take your anger?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's an emotion, and it's a reasonable emotion. And I've had more than one person just come up completely short and say, oh, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. That's similar to what I say. God made us with emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's anticipating these emotions to be used for and against him. And it's not going to ever overwhelm him. But if it overwhelms you, connect with someone, connect with a friend, connect with a professional, connect with a faith community leader, because it's never going to be overwhelming for him, but it will overwhelm us. And that's where we can cry out for support from him, but also to our communities. And it's not a failing of you as a human. It's just a part of the human experience. So, yeah.
Well, depending on your faith tradition, there are all kinds of examples in the different denominations of people crying out. And it doesn't matter whether it's the Hebrew scriptures or the New Testament or Hinduism or Buddhism. All of the traditions have some sort of example of times of trial that we're all going to have.
Yeah, Jesus wept. It's exemplified there for us. So
that's the shortest quote in the Bible.
Is it?
Just a little trivia
tidbit of information. Well, thanks, Peggy. I appreciate you being here with us today. This was a lovely conversation. Hopefully it helps whoever is listening to this. And if it is helpful, please share this episode with friends and family. And I think we are wrapping up for the season, actually. So this will likely be our last episode of the 2025 season. So thanks for being our special guest at the end of the year, Peggy. I'm
pleasure.
Glad to have done this with you. But keep an eye out, everyone listening, for next year, and like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Give us a thumbs up, all those good things. Help us get some movement with the podcast. And if you've got thoughts or ideas for content or episodes next season, please email in the show notes. You'll see that as well. And we'll start making a list and hopefully hit some topics that people are interested in. Until next time, thank you all for listening. I'm sure Matt would say the same thing if he were here with us today. And Peggy, again, thanks for being here. And everyone have a good holiday season.
Be blessed.
Thanks for joining our conversation on this episode of the Madness and Grace podcast. If you found value in our discussion today, we'd love it if you'd subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode.
And if you enjoyed what you heard, please consider leaving us a rating and review. It helps others find these important conversations.
Sharing this podcast with friends and family members is also a wonderful way to extend hope to those who might be struggling with mental health concerns.
We'll be back next time with another candid conversation about madness and grace. See you then.